Good morning and welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. I'm Tom Frest and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we'll get right to business this morning with our continuing our reading and discussion of this book, Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. And if you're following along on Google Books, we'll begin on page 129, the last full paragraph of the book. Remember, yesterday we were beginning to conclude our discussion about the Council of Thurles, a city in south-central Roman Catholic Ireland, and they were banning the Queen's schools, a series of colleges and universities that the Queen proposed to erect in Ireland to help raise up the ignorant Irish from their poverty and from their ignorance, and to make them contributing members of society. And the Roman Catholic priests got together in a council, in a synod, and forbade Roman Catholics to attend. And rather that they would be excommunicated from the church if they did attend to these Queen colleges, and would rather that they maintain their ignorance in the Roman Catholic schools or no school at all. Now, near the conclusion of this particular synod, Council of Thurles, they issued an address addressing the Irish people. And it says in the last paragraph on page 129, it says, "In the pastoral address issued by the synod, it would appear as if the fathers contemplated a general crusade against knowledge. It is not in Ireland only that the light is beginning to shine, but all over the world. And in the following passage of their manifesto, this pastoral address, they proclaim their intention of hunting it out, that is education, hunting it out and banishing it from every land, and resting not till they have restored the reign of universal night." Okay, so it's not only against Protestant teaching that they were opposed, but of secular learning. Those very arts and sciences with which man feeds himself and occupies himself to contribute to his society. So we might find this startling that Rome so loves ignorance that they would not only shut out the light of the gospel, but they would shut out the light of secular education. And in a quote from this pastoral address, it says, quote, "The alarming spectacle," says the synod, "which the Christian world exhibits in the present day, the novel but formidable forms in which error presents itself, and the manifold evils and perils by which the Church, that is, the Roman Catholic Church, is encompassed, must be evident to the most superficial observer. It is no longer a single heresy or an eccentric fanaticism, the denial of some revealed truth, or the excesses of some extravagant error, but a comprehensive, all-pervading, well-digested system of unbelief suited to every capacity and reaching every intellect that corrupts and desolates the moral world. Is not such a calamitous spectacle which the continent of Europe offers to us at this very moment?" Unquote. So this is while attacking the Queen's colleges, it has particularly taken to attack Protestantism as heresy, a heresy that not only grips England, but grips the entire continent of Europe. Okay? And that the Roman Catholic Church, these priests claim that the Roman Catholic Church is simply surrounded by heresy. So it's trying to indoctrinate the Irish Roman Catholics that theirs is the only true Catholic system, and that all of Europe is fallen under the influence of Protestantism, And it is this emphasis on education, secular education, rather than Roman Catholic canon law and Roman Catholic doctrine and Roman Catholic dogma and morals and discipline, that has corrupted the whole world. So clearly the attitude of this Roman Catholic Synod goes beyond their hatred of education, but it condemns the liberties that have embraced all of Europe because of Protestantism. Now, the author is going to compare the papacy and its attitude toward learning with that of a Muslim caliphate known as Omar. And Omar was the one who destroyed the renowned library at Alexandria in Egypt. It was supposedly a storehouse of all the scientific learnings that have been achieved by mankind throughout history, and was considered to be one of the great wonders of the world, this Alexandrian library. It was a storehouse of all learning, according to this author. Now he says, when the Caliph Omar ordered the famous library at Alexandria to be destroyed, he is said to have accompanied the sentence adjudging those monuments of learning, the arts, and the genius of antiquity to the flames, with the sapient remark, here's what he said, quote, "If these writings of the Greeks agree with the Quran, they are useless." In other words, they're redundant and need not to be preserved. Okay? So as he's getting ready to burn this library, this vast library of learning, he said, if the writings within this library are consistent with the Quran, then they are redundant and we don't need them. We've got the Quran. And, he says further, if they disagree with the Quran, they are pernicious and ought to be destroyed, unquote. So now, the author, James A. Wiley, is comparing the Roman pontiff's attitude toward learning with that of this Mohammedan Omar that destroyed the Alexandrian library. If the universities of the world agree with Roman Catholic canon law, then they're redundant and we don't need them. And if they are contrary to Roman Catholic canon law and the authority of the Pope, they are pernicious and ought to be destroyed. All right? Now he continues, he says, so says the Church of Rome when erecting a funeral pile for the learning and arts and the genius of both ancients and moderns. Okay, he says the same thing that the Caliph Omar said about the Library of Egypt, but not only for the knowledge gained throughout antiquity, but the knowledge gained during modern times. And what do we know modern times refers to? The Protestant Reformation. Okay? He says if these sciences agree with the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church, they're useless. In other words, redundant, and need not be preserved. If they disagree, they are pernicious and ought to be destroyed. So, everyone should understand by now the Vatican's assessment of education. It's not necessary. Rome is already the great teacher of the world. And if the universities and colleges agree with Rome, they're not needed. And if they disagree, they ought to be destroyed. So that's the logic used by this synod at Thurles to discredit the Queen's colleges in Roman Catholic Ireland. Now he says, is not the papal infallibility the sum of all wisdom, human and divine? What need is there that a man should know more? If he knows that, he knows enough. If he knows anything beyond that, he knows more than he ought. So reasoned the fathers at Thurles. In truth, the denunciations of Rome threatened to be more sweeping than the brand of Omar. Okay? A more sweeping, all-inclusive hatred for learning than was even demonstrated by the Caliph Omar in his destruction of the library in Alexandria. Excuse me, he says the papal bull will be more exterminating than the Caliph's brand. Vast as the Alexandrian shipwreck was, something survived. The walls of the doomed edifice, the Alexandrian library, did not enclose all the mental treasures of the ancient world, and therefore all did not perish in the conflagration. But not so much as a line or a thought which genius ever bequeathed to mankind would possibly escape the devastation which the modern Omar, that is, the papacy, now threatens to inflict upon the world. When before did literature and knowledge encounter such a destroyer? The Muslim, the Vandal, the Goth are all outstripped by the monk, and I will add from Rome. Okay? And he says, when the scholar takes into account the missed chances of accident, the waste of time, and the revolutions of war, the number of his treasures rather than of his losses will be the object of his surprise. But what neither accident nor time nor barbarism nor war has been able to destroy, Rome has now the will, if not the power, to annihilate. Singly, she threatens to be more destructive to the treasures which mind has accumulated than all the calamities which in combination or succession have ravaged the earth. It is a total loss of its mental wealth which awaits the world if Rome has her way, and one, too, that will be final, for there will be no need that it should ever be followed a second time. When the treasures of learning in former times perished by the rage of barbarism or of war, the thinking faculty itself survived, and like the bee, when its cell is rifled, it's speedily set to work to repair the loss. But the destructive rage of the priesthood, the Roman Catholic priesthood, will not spare mind itself. It is the thinking faculty which it aims at destroying, so that the night which it has decreed for the world may be unbroken by so much as a solitary ray. If it rests with Rome, there awaits the human race an eternity of ignorance. Eloquent words spoken by James A. Wiley, who plainly says it's not only learning, libraries, schools of arts that the papacy wishes to destroy. He wishes to destroy the thinking mind. Okay? Rome's best servants are mindless robots, just doing what they're told. Mindlessly, unquestioningly doing what they're told, and they do so with a religious fervor. Okay? To replace the mentality of a mind with rote assent. Just plainly, mindlessly obey the priest. Don't think for yourself. And for heaven's sakes, don't read the Bible. So you know, you might have some better understanding now of just how much the Vatican loathes a thinking man. Okay, and that's what made Protestants so potentially dangerous for the papacy, and not just potentially. They liberated all of Europe. They taught learning. They taught thinking. They taught a man how to reason, and especially how to reason in the scriptures. And the result was the recognition that the papacy was a tyrant and depended upon the ignorance of the world to maintain his status, his controlling tyrannical status. And once the people understood the Bible, once they understood the arts and the sciences, they left Rome, proclaimed their independence, and then put their efforts to work to raise humanity with them. That's what England attempted to do to the darkness of Ireland, to raise up the Irish Roman Catholics so that at the very least they could at least feed themselves and not go around the world being beggars. All right. Rome got in the way of progress and stopped the installation of the Queen's colleges. Now he addresses the next portion of the chapter, the Ascot Fathers, or let there be darkness. And along the same attitude, he says, in the August of 1852, there was held a provincial synod of St. Mary's Ascot, by which the papal aggression was advanced a stage. Okay, here's another Roman Catholic priestly synod. The priests get together to legislate. They make laws governing their people and everyone in their province, Protestant alike, and then they send off their laws to be stamped of approval by the papacy. Okay? So that's what a synod, I know I'm being redundant, but it bears repeating. I want every one of my listeners to know what a gathering of Roman Catholic bishops is intended to do. It's to pass laws. All right? Something that an independent nation does not approve of unless it has been overthrown by this Roman Catholic faith. Okay? All right. It says, in the August of 1852, there was holden a provincial synod of St. Mary's Ascot, by which the papal aggression was advanced a stage. Immediately on the breaking up of the synod, the fathers issued not their decrees, for these they had sent to Rome to be ratified by the Pope, but a synodical letter to the, quote, faithful under their jurisdiction, unquote. This document was a curiosity in its way, being a farrago of pious phrases, scriptural quotations, ejaculatory prayers, high-sounding self-laudations, a few quiet anathemas on Protestants, some compliments to education, which, like the amens of Macbeth, stuck in the throat of this writer, the whole ending with most fervent exhortations to the cultivation of peace, of brotherly love, and the forgiveness of injuries. Okay? Kind of sounds like Vatican Council II, doesn't it? Gag me with a spoon, right? Now it says the paper looked as if it had been written in a foreign tongue, and perhaps in a foreign city, and done into tolerable English, and published not so much for the sake of Romanists as for the sake of Protestants, whom it is meant to hoodwink and deceive. The document bore on its forehead the flagrant violation of the law of the land. Here's what it said, quote, we, the Archbishop and bishops of the province of Westminster, remember the ecclesiastical law that they rescinded, or that they plainly just walked over, the Ecclesiastical Titles Act? Here's how they addressed themselves in their synodical letter. We, the Archbishop and bishops of the province of Westminster, so ran its preamble. Let the reader mark the cool effrontery of the terms, quote, province of Westminster. How quietly did the document ignore the divisions of the kingdom by the Queen and the Parliament, and recognize those only which were made by the edict from the Flaminian Gate. Okay? So they completely done what they originally promised not to do was to break up England into jurisdictions to be held by the priests and the bishops. Okay, now it's out in the open. They address themselves as the Archbishop and the bishops of the province of Westminster. This is a complete affront to the Queen and the Parliament. This is an act of treason. This is an act of rebellion. But it is consistent with the papal bull that Cardinal Wiseman read when he came back ashore. The edict from the Flaminian Gate, this papal bull is called. Now, in the document, moreover, the bishops claimed, quote, jurisdiction, unquote, a term implying the possession of lawful powers, and therefore, in a case where no such powers exist, asserting a right in the Pope to intermeddle at his pleasure with the laws and the institutions of this country, and to interpolate among them institutions and laws having a compulsory and obligatory force. So, clearly, this is a statement that the Pope has barged in, established jurisdictions in this country overseen by bishops, and they're making mandatory laws. And he says, and further, the assembled bishops addressed only, quote-unquote, the faithful under their jurisdiction, which clearly implied that they have jurisdiction over the unfaithful, that is, over the Majesty's Protestant subjects, and that if that jurisdiction be not enforced, it is only from a defect of power and not of right. Okay? So if they can't enforce these synodical laws, now become Roman Catholic canon law, once signified by the Pope, if they cannot impose or enforce obedience to these papal laws, then it's only for lack of power and not for lack of the right to do so. And it says, in this synod we have the first instance since the Reformation of a body of popish ecclesiastics meeting together in Great Britain to make laws which, when they have received the assent of a foreign prince, that is the Pope, are to be binding, are to possess authority, and are to be enforced. Here, in short, we have a parliament framing laws, claiming jurisdiction over all Her Majesty's subjects, and exercising that jurisdiction over a large body of them by enforcing obedience to its laws. And again, I know it sounds repetitious, but the very activities engaged in by this synod of bishops, these many synods of bishops that we've been discussing in this book, are the same activities conducted by the synods of bishops that meet in this country. They pass laws, they send them to the Pope to be ratified, they come back in the form of Roman Catholic canon law, and they are to be enforced on everyone within the jurisdiction. Now, if logic follows, it is also mandated by these cardinals and bishops and priests to influence the civil law, that is, the Parliament and the Presidency and the Supreme Court, to make those the law of the land, and to make the secular government the servant of the church, to enforce Roman Catholic canon law. And that's why I say our civil laws are simply Roman Catholic canon law written in a non-offensive or non-religious language. And we are all, without our knowledge, subject to Roman Catholic canon law, subject to the authority of the Pope. And it's only because of the ignorance of American people. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio.
book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you'd like to support Inquisition Update and keep Inquisition Update on the air, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors it. It's because of the contribution of my listeners that Inquisition Update stays on the air. So please support First Amendment Radio. And if you'd like to contact me, please do so directly by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Just like the waves of the sea, tom@seawaves.us. Now, if you were following along in the first portion of the program, I laid the scenario where the function of the synods, the bishops, is to legislate, to pass laws. And it is naturally the business of the state to enforce those laws according to Roman Catholic canon law. Once canon law has been established through these synods, then it is the duty of the state to enforce those laws. Now, I want to paint a scenario for you that you might find a bit disturbing. Now, you and I, being Protestant, we would protest such an abuse of our liberties. To think that a foreign potentate is sanctioning the laws of this country and our government is enforcing them upon us, that makes our government our enemy, doesn't it? It makes our government the enemy of Jesus Christ and the gospel. It makes our government the enemy of the liberty whereby Christ hath made us free. Well, if you were Satan wishing to gain control of God's people and cause them to rebel against God himself, you'd want to have a little, incentive, wouldn't you? Let me ask you a question. What do you think the general purpose of the Social Security Act was? That we all would pay taxes for a retirement benefit when we get 65 years old, 62, 65 years old. Sounds all well and good, doesn't it? We all contributed, we all signed in and took our mark from the government. We paid our taxes all of our lives, and now we're nearing our retirement age, and we're looking forward to that quote-unquote entitlement. Looking to get back a bit of our investment to make life a little easier. But what happens if the government, now becoming the servant of the Pope, says, well, we've got your entitlements in reserve, and we'll give them to you on one condition. That is, you worship the Roman Pontiff. You've obeyed his laws all your life without your knowledge. But now we're talking about worship. Let's say the government says that from now on, Sunday's going to be a universal day of rest, and you're going to be required to go to Mass. Now, we don't care if you go to your Protestant churches as long as they serve the Mass. Since the Roman Catholic churches aren't big enough to occupy all of you, your little Protestant churches are going to have to serve the Mass. And you go to Mass on Sunday. Oh, and by the way, Saturday night, or sometime during the week, just before Mass, you must go to the priest and confess your sins. What if? Now some, I can just hear them. Some say, Tom, that system's already in place. But what if it becomes a law in this country that if you want to see one single penny of all the money that you've fed to the federal government all your life for the hope of a little relief when you become of age where you cannot work anymore, what if they cause you to openly rebel against God? Isn't that what Satan would have you do? Openly rebel against God? You see, our government put the hook in our jaw a long time ago. It's been in the works to do this a long time ago. You see, a Christian is supposed to work for his living and to keep some money aside for his old age and for the education of his children, and put them in a school that venerates Christ, that teaches the gospel, plus the liberal arts. A man of God is to be responsible for his own living and not live off others. And out of his excess, to help those who don't have. But in a system that Rome built, there is no excess. You have to depend upon the government for your living. You have to depend upon the government for your education. You have to depend upon the government for your retirement pension. That's bad enough. But what happens if the government that you were loyal to all of your life turns out to be a papal government, and he's been serving the Pope ever since? and now is going to use the carrot. You want your Social Security benefits? You want health care? You want entitlements? You want Medicare? Then bow down and worship the Pope. You see, it didn't bother Satan at all to say that to Jesus. Why wouldn't Satan do us as he did Jesus? Just bow down and worship me. If you want earthly goods, if you want your Social Security, then just bow down and worship my man in Rome. You say impossible? Many insist that that's the system that we live under today. It's a horrendous reality. And it's been a brewing for centuries. The papacy began to rebuild this construction right after the Protestant Reformation. Right after he was torn from all of his lands and his good and his wealth and his power and his influence and his control over the kings of the earth. Rome has steadily been rebuilding Rome. Steadily rebuilding the old world order. And now he has control of our government. The shadow government, the dioceses, the archdioceses, the synods of bishops are in the same business and have been in the same business of this country since the establishment of the first diocese in this country under Jesuit priest John Carroll of Baltimore. It started with that. Just like a cancer, a tumor starts its malignancy with one cell. And it has metastasized until it covers this country from border to border and coast to coast. That governing institution, that shadow government, which is visible in every country, has now canvassed the entire United States of America, and they wield a political mandate in Washington, D.C. Now, if our government ever created the Social Security system for our benefit, let's just take it for granted. Let's just, give them a gimme. If there ever was a true altruistic attitude of the government with regards to the Social Security system, you can kiss it goodbye. And now it's going to be used as the carrot, and after that comes the stick. You don't take the carrot, then you get the stick. No Social Security, no health care, no Medicaid, no Medicare, no entitlements. You depend upon your God. If the God in Rome is not your God, then you must depend upon the one that you profess with your mouth. And you seek him for your daily living. That's where we're heading. That's the only hope for American Christians today, true Bible-believing Christians today. Because true Bible-believing Christians would never knowingly bend their knee to the Roman pontiff or the beast that carries her in Washington, D.C. So better be prepared for hard times, or to have a table prepared for you in the presence of your enemies. That's where we're heading. And it's the purpose of Inquisition Update to prepare God's people for what's coming. Many call Inquisition Update, more specifically Tom Friess, a fearmonger. It's not fear-mongering if it's the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. It's not fear-mongering if it's true. The Bible calls it prudence. Now, continuing with the book, page 133, illustrations from recent European history. The main drift of the document, this synodical letter that we talked about before, the main drift of the document was to propound and enjoin upon their flocks a scheme of minimizing, in the first instance, and ultimately extinguishing the knowledge of Roman Catholics, and for effecting the further object of isolating them from their Protestant fellow citizens in order that they may be brought up to fear, distrust, and hate them. No man nowadays, in this country at least, dare openly avow himself the champion of ignorance. Such being the case, the Church of Rome is reduced to the necessity of fighting the battle of darkness under the banners of light. Knowledge she can no more permit than before. But knowledge is breaking in upon her people in this country, and nothing must be left undone which it is in the power of the Church to do to rescue her people, or more properly herself, from this imminent peril. Her plan is one by which, under pretense of improving education, she substitutes in its place a thorough and unmitigated training in her dogmas. Okay? So whenever Rome pretends to champion education, what is primary in that education is the inculcation of Roman Catholic dogma. In other words, Roman Catholic canon law. And it says the education of the poor, the fathers remark, is one of the most important duties confided to the quote-unquote church. And we know this from our thorough study of the Roman Catholic institution in its regard to education. She considers the education of the poor as one of her marks of authority, one of her main reasons for existence, education. Of course, in Roman Catholic dogma. All right. Indeed, if the church has been so painstaking and exemplary in education, how comes it that nations educated and enlightened under papal Rome have lost all knowledge of arts and letters under the tuition of the church? In other words, why is there so much illiteracy in Roman Catholic countries? If Rome champions herself as the great god of education. He says, but the fathers observe, while the obligation has been faithfully discharged in all ages, the manner of doing it must vary with the circumstances of time and place. Quote, when the faith is undisturbed, unquote. That is, when Roman Catholic faith is undisturbed, when it's not challenged by Protestantism. In other words, in a strictly Roman Catholic country where there's no competition for the minds of men, that is, when the authority of the church is unchallenged and her most monstrous doctrines accepted as truths, quote, then the training of the child in the way wherein he has to walk is a simple task, unquote. So simple that it may be all but left to itself, says the author. This education has been completed when he has been baptized, taught to repeat his Ave Maria, and handed over to his confessor. Okay? So that's the extent of the education in a Roman Catholic country. First you're baptized, then you're taught to say the Ave Maria, then you're sent to your Roman Catholic priest for confession. That's all you have to know in a Roman Catholic country. Why? Because there's no Protestant to challenge it. So ignorance is the rule of the day in a Roman Catholic country. And that's why you can look the world over and count the Catholic nations by counting the illiterate nations. Those nations that are racked by crime. Those nations that are racked by poverty. Those nations that are racked by idolatry and false religion and no religion at all. That's why ever since the Protestant Reformation there has been this extreme contrast between Bible reading, affluent, educated, peace-loving, industrious people and then the Roman Catholic world. Nothing is more demonstrative of the satanic origin of the Roman Catholic Church than to compare the existence in a Roman Catholic country with that of the existence in a Protestant country. It's been made evident by the God of glory so that no one can make a mistake. They are put side by side in the world to be an open global testimony to the significance of error, contrasted with the light of Christ. The darkness of this world is headed by the papacy, and the light of the world, the affluence of the world, the liberty of the world is championed by Bible-believing Christians. There's a direct correlation between illiteracy, crime, idolatry, and every kind of debauchery in a Roman Catholic country than the industriousness and the rule of law and piety in a Protestant country. And the degree to which a Protestant country is debauched is the degree to which Roman Catholicism has gained an upper hand in that Protestant country. Has our country lost its way? Has our country lost its morals? Is the gospel as important today as it was, say, 150 years ago? Almost nobody would disagree with you that our country's gone to hell in a handbasket. And my listeners ought to know why. My listeners ought to know why. England ought to know why their country has fallen. And we need to take action to correct the error of Romanism in this country. A Roman Catholic's education has been completed when he has been baptized, taught to repeat his Ave Maria, and handed over to his confessor. Quote, but where on every side aggression has to be encountered, unquote, that is, aggression being everywhere that Roman Catholicism is in the equal company with Protestantism, he says that is where the light may flash upon his mind from every book he opens and every school and church he enters. Quote unquote, endless persecution and multiplied safeguards must be employed. Okay? Now we're still talking about education. We're talking now about a Catholic Church in a Protestant country that is completely surrounded with light from Protestantism. Roman Catholicism must take endless precautions and multiplied safeguards. Against what? against light. Okay? If you want darkness to prevail in a country of light, you must take endless precautions and multiplied safeguards. What do you suppose those endless precautions and multiplied safeguards are? Get control of the government. Make Roman Catholicism the state-sponsored religion. I mean, everybody knows the Roman Catholics can't go door to door and convert Protestants to Roman Catholicism. So what's the only hope that Rome has? To make a nation of light turn into darkness. Get control of the government. And thereby get control of the schools. And thereby get control of the churches. Get control of the pastors. And finally, to get control of Protestants, whether they like it or not. He says, such, the fathers assured us, is the case now. And it is only through a quote-unquote laborious education that they can guarantee to the, quote, little ones a single sound principle, one saving truth, unquote. What is that? Roman Catholicism, of course. He says, accordingly, this Roman Catholic Council goes on to recommend an institution which has recently been erected and which is known by the name of the, quote, Poor School Committee, unquote. This committee is composed of priests, Roman Catholic priests and laymen, selected from all the Romanist dioceses. Its work is to provide funds and to regulate the working of their institution. That institution, we are told, has already been extensively useful, and it is proposed still further to extend its utility by adopting the suggestions of the committee to appoint in the various dioceses ecclesiastical inspectors, quote, whose duty it will be to examine the scholars in the religious portion of their education, to grant certificates, award prizes, and for proficiency in it, unquote. That is, in the religious branch, and to give anyone who may aspire to office of teacher the means of proving himself morally fit and to prevent the unworthy from obtaining so important an office. Now, what did James A. Wiley just tell you? Well, there's a committee set up by this Synod of Bishops to examine the schools. More particularly, to examine the religious education of these schools and to make them competitive. They weren't really concerned at all about the liberal arts and sciences. They'll take care of themselves. They're not important, in Ireland especially. What is important to the priesthood is to make sure that every graduate of these schools is religiously educated, religiously motivated, and only they should occupy the office of a teacher in any school. That's how they won the war against the Queen's colleges. That's how they maintained the ignorance of the Irish. And that's why Ireland remained poor and is still poor today. What are they doing in our education system? I think an investigation will discover that they have done nothing but destroy our schools to prepare them for the New World Order. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Inquisition update on First Amendment Radio.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. you will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.